Time glitch at my university library at UCSB. While I experienced a time glitch at work last year in May 2021, it was not my first time related glitch in the Matrix. My first glitch related to time took place at the library at the University of California, Santa Barbara during my first year of college. I attended UCSB from 2000 to 2004. I barely went out in order to not spend any money if possible, and probably used all the credits on my meal plan for the school year. As a bookish student, I spent a lot of time at Davidson Library in my freshman year, choosing the floor I would study at with no rhythm or rhyme. By the end of the school year, I could honestly say that I have studied on each floor of the library at least once, including inside the spectacular Pacific Rim room on the 8th floor. Halfway into the first quarter of the school year in the middle of October 2000, I began preparing for my midterms. I was not the type of person who could study at home, treating my dorm room at Santa Rosa Residence Hall as my bedroom and nothing else. The glitch took place after I had taken half of my midterms. I had taken 2 of my midterms in as many days as far and met up with my roommate at Ortega for lunch at around noon. Afterwards, we parted ways as we headed for the University Center, UCen, to start his shift at the bookstore while I headed for Davidson Library. I entered the library through the Davidson entrance since, at the time, it was the main entrance to the library, showing my age, as major renovations saw the construction of a new library entrance and a wing a decade after I graduated and left the school. I headed for the ocean elevators, a set of 3 elevators with access to all 8 floors of the library tower, and pressed the up button. The middle elevator opened immediately. I stepped inside, turned around, pressed the button for the 8th floor, and after a short wait, the elevator doors closed, and I went up to the 8th floor alone without stopping on any of the floors in between. When the elevator doors opened on the 8th floor, I stepped outside the elevator, took 2 steps, and abruptly stopped in my tracks. I was surrounded by the exposed concrete floor slab. Save for the elevated tile flooring I was standing on directly in front of the elevator. There was construction equipment and bags of masonry, material everywhere, but there was no walls or windows to speak of. Undoubtedly, the place I ended up in was under construction and open to the elements. I went back inside the elevator to see which floor I was on, and the LED panel showed a number 8 on the down arrow. Tentatively, I went back outside and walked straight from the elevator due west towards the edge of the apparent construction area. In the distance, I saw the setting sun slowly dipping below the horizon of the Pacific Ocean. If you go to the beach to watch the sunset at UCSB over the course of the year, you'll see that thanks to the tilt of the Earth, the sun sets over the Pacific Ocean during the colder winter months and over the California mainland during the warmer springs and summer months. Seeing the sunset caught me off guard almost right away since it was not supposed to occur for several hours. After all, my roommate and I had left the dining commons together at about 5 minutes before 1, so he wouldn't be late for work. I was further shocked by something else I saw, or rather didn't see. I looked down at the UCen by the campus lagoon and Stork Tower was not there. I mean, there is no way anyone on campus could overlook a bell and clock tower that stands 175 feet, 53 meters, let alone from the vantage point of the 8th floor of the library. I turned to my right, looked due north, and saw the peaks of the Santa Ynez Mountains covered in snow. As far as I knew, no precipitation of any kind had yet fallen on the Santa Barbara area since the beginning of the school year, never mind any rain in the local beach areas, and especially not any snow in the local mountains. While I stared at the snow-covered mountains, a small plane emerged from just below my field of vision and gained altitude, apparently taking off from the local airport. After the plane disappeared from sight, I looked down and saw the rooftop of the original 2-story library adjacent to the library tower. I did an about face and looked due south towards the Pacific Ocean. In the distance, I saw Santa Cruz Island, the Channel Islands archipelago just off the coast. When I looked down, I was stunned to find the 4-story wing built just south of the library was missing. In its place were far more bicycle racks than I remember seeing previously. All these bike racks extended from the bike path to the edge of the library tower. By the way, I had only been on the 8th floor for about 2 minutes so far, so I was somewhat surprised when I saw that the doors of the elevator I took were still open as I turned around. While taking all of this in, I snapped back to my purpose of being there at the library in the first place, and promptly headed due east for behind the elevators, where the Pacific View room should have been. Unfortunately, this area was also under construction. I looked around this edge of the concrete floor slab and saw the web hall below. Given the distance between the library and web hall, another building very well fit in the open space, I looked up and in the distance saw the Mesa, an expansive neighborhood in the city of Santa Barbara. The neighborhood diverted my attention for something I was not expecting to see: streetlights. The apparent sunset meant that streetlights were slowly turning on throughout the city as it was becoming evening. I was not going to get caught in the darkness of an apparently unfinished library floor that did not have any electricity or lights, nor did I want to stick around in a place and time that was very different from the one I came from. I headed for the very elevator I took since its doors were still open and pressed the one button. The doors promptly closed, and I headed back downstairs. As I made my way down, I come to the disconcerting conclusion that somehow, some way, I went back in time. It wasn't just an abrupt change in the time of day either. I briefly ended up in the past when the library was still under construction, while Stork Tower and the 4-story wing of the building did not exist yet. When I reached the first floor, I stepped outside of the elevator and looked to my right. I saw the long passageway connecting the library tower to the original library. Adjacent to the elevators were several payphones, as well as a dorm phone. My roommate and I opted not to get a landline for our dorm since we had cell phones anyways. I turned to my left and walked towards the entrance I just walked through mere minutes ago. To my enormous relief, I saw the current cereal section, which housed printed magazines, journals, newspapers, and is located on the lower level, the first floor of the 4-story wing. Next to the entrance of the section is a staircase leading to the ethnic and gender studies section on the second floor of the same wing. There were lots of people on the staircase going in both directions as I headed for the exit. I looked through the glass doors and realized that not only was I back in the present time, but also the same day of time when I first arrived there 5 minutes ago. As I stepped outside of the library, soaring between Gavette's Hall and the music library was Stork Tower. I walked towards the tower and paused upon arriving at the entrance of the music library. I continued looking up at Stork Tower, still pondering what I had seen up in the library towers. I went inside the USEN, found a table outside a cafe, and studied for my third midterm until 5 p.m. when my roommate got off work at the bookstore. He was surprised to see me, of course. Over dinner back at Ortega, I told him everything that I had experienced just after lunch that day. He was skeptical, but he ultimately believed me, especially because he felt that my earnest recollection of the day's events over the years, we'll still keep in touch this day, was the only time he sensed fear in me. This was one of the only times I'd ever experienced during my time at UCSB. I had been to the 8th floor of the library tower countless times since until I graduated, but I never went back in time again. I've taken my roommate and our friends there even. I've taken my family there while my sister was exploring colleges. My sister ended up going to UCSB as well. I've taken classmates and even a girlfriend up there. Sadly, I was not able to replicate my experience of going back in time with any one of them. During the elevator rides to the 8th floor, I would secretly hope that the doors would open to a construction site with random but prominent features from the library skyline missing in all directions, only to be disappointed upon seeing the scale model of the university as soon as elevator doors opened on the 8th floor, and ultimately a long ago fully built library floor with a spectacular view of the Pacific Ocean each and every time. Time stopped. So this is a true experience that happened to my brother. A little background on him. He's a married man with 4 young girls and your average close-knit family. He is quite an honest person that keeps to his job and family. This happened to him several years back. It was a Sunday morning and he was in church with his family. The time of year was December, within a week or so of Christmas. He was sitting through the service just like any other Sunday when the experience began. He was listening to the pastor read scriptures from the Bible when everything around him began to slow down. He describes the pastor voice, the movement of people, the ambient noise. Everything starts to slow down until everything stops. He said everything had froze, and he felt like he was in church with all mannequins. He turns briefly to his family, and they just look frozen in time. All this thought is processed in a second. He then says he turns to the pastor who was speaking, and he is at the podium frozen, just standing there. At this moment, he sees a person walk out from the right side of the front stage. The person is behind the pastor and just slowly walking across from right to left. The person gets about halfway across the stage when he turns his head and locks eyes with him. He never stopped, just turned his head while in stride to make eye contact with my brother for a split second, and turns his head back straight and continues to walk to the left side behind the curtain and out of sight. At this moment, when the person walks out of sight, everything slowly comes back into reality. He turns to his wife and says, "Did you see that man?" She obviously is confused, and he doesn't have a clue what just happened. He said time literally stopped and everyone and everything froze in position while he was left to fully experience whatever just occurred. Now, about the person he saw, this is gonna sound absolutely crazy, and some will probably discredit this as bullshit, but the person that walked across the back of the front stage was dressed just like Santa Claus. He tells me he had a beard as well as the red suit on. I don't know if this is a coincidence because it was nearing Christmas Day. He tells his wife about what happened, and of course she laughs, and then he just decides to keep it to himself. Does anyone anywhere have even the tiniest clue of what the fuck happened, and why on earth would he experience this all alone and no one else in the building? This is a 100% true account that happened to him, believe it or not. Time travel to the future just to watch a crappy movie. My father had me for the weekend around when I was 7, and as per usual, he took me to a movie theater on a Saturday afternoon. I distinctly remember this movie. It was Disney's Jungle 2 Jungle with Tim Allen. It was typical bad Disney 90s movie, just exactly what you'd expect. You had Tim Allen as a successful business dude and kind of a douche, that one-star kid from that one show, and a bunch of bad tropes about foreigners in America. We left, went to Fuddruckers for dinner, and then headed back to our hotel. Fairly usual dad weekend. About 6 months later, my dad had me again for another weekend. We were going to eat one place or another, and while in the car, I noticed an advertisement for Jungle to Jungle, which was about to be released. I thought this perfectly odd since I had already seen the movie and could recall the plot really well. I mentioned to my dad and asked how we had seen the movie so long before it had been released, and he had no idea what I was talking about. I told him about the dad weekend from a few months prior, how we went to the movies, then Fuddruckers, then the hotel. He didn't recall at all. He chalked it up to me being confused with hundreds of other weekends. But when I started recalling the plot, he became a little more interested. I vividly remember sitting through the whole film, still trying to reconcile the fact that Tim Allen was not in fact Santa Claus, which at the time was my favorite Christmas movie. I remember specific scenes and interactions, the character names, everything. I considered a few explanations. 1, I saw a preview and I have a really vivid imagination. 2, my memory was playing tricks on me and I saw the movie much closer to the advertisement event than I had thought. 3, I am aware that this film is an adaptation of a French film, Un Indien dans la ville, from a few years prior. Dad thought it was confusing, but left it at that. I, on the other hand, never been able to figure out how to control my time-traveling ability and why I would use my awesome powers to watch shitty 90s movies with Tim Allen.